Well, good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory. This is a lecture on Friends of the Desert Mountain. My name is Ron Treat, and I am a volunteer docent here at the observatory in particular, and I'm also an advisory commissioner. So we're here to welcome you for this show and let you know that we are here on behalf of the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory Foundation, which helps us with putting on these particular shows. So occasionally we have to make sure that they have the resources necessary to do this. And at the entryway, you can find the latest program guides that are available to you. In addition, there's envelopes there for those who feel inclined to contribute. And this afternoon's lecture is going to be about Friends of the Desert Mountains. And Ada Knuckle, who is a lead volunteer and program guide, I guess is what you'd call her, is going to talk to you about it. And the Friends is a nonprofit, which is very much like my whole career has been, but we recommend that you get to know this particular organization. So Ada Knuckles, if you'd please join us.
Welcome, everyone, to the Rancho Mirage Library and to Friends of the Desert Mountains. For those of you who do not know Friends of the Desert Mountains, we are the nonprofit organization that supports the Santa Rosa San Jacinto Mountains Monument federal staff, both the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM. And as Dani will be telling you in the lecture today, she will describe where the monument is, I'm sure, and give you more information about that. So the Friends of the Desert Mountains, as volunteers, we do a lot of trail work. So when you go out hiking, you will see signs on the trails or trails lined with rocks, so you can thank our volunteers for doing that. We also do a lot of interpretive hikes and other types of educational things besides that. So, but today we're asking Dani Ortiz, one of our local gals from the Coachella Valley. She graduated from Palm Springs High School, went on to Redlands to get her biology degree. She came back to the Valley, worked for a few years, and then got her environmental degree from Green Mountain University. So she is now back in the Valley again and in charge of the entire National Monument and its staff. So please welcome Dani Ortiz, a very good friend of mine.
I guess it's afternoon, right? Good afternoon. So yes, my name's Dani Ortiz. I work, if you don't know the acronym BLM, that's the Bureau of Land Management. And I've worked for the Bureau of Land Management for about 5 years now. The past 2 years have been in this Monument Manager position, which has actually been a dream job of mine. I started my federal career at this monument as a student employee over 15 years ago. So I'm happy to be back in the monument, working there, working with great partners, working with the Friends group that people like Ada actually helped me get my master's degree to graduate to get a federal job. So really thankful for Friends, the partnership, and being back. And to kick things off, just curious, show of hands, how many of you guys are familiar with the Santa Rosa, San Jacinto Mountains National Monument? Okay, there's a few hands. How about of those hands, anybody done some hiking in the monument? A few hands. Does anybody not know where the monument's located or anything with that? Okay, so again, still some more hands. So hopefully today, my goal with this presentation is to hopefully get you guys excited with learning, one, that there is a monument right here in our backyard throughout the Coachella Valley, and two, hopefully inspire you with some of the stuff that I'm going to go over with things to see, explore, that if you haven't been in the monument, hopefully you'll want to go out for your first time, go explore. And if you have been out, maybe encourage you to explore some new areas that maybe you haven't seen yet, or this might give you some ideas where to look. So for this monument, this is the public law that made this monument become what it is. It designated this monument. And what's unique about the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains National Monument is that it was congressionally designated. It was not done through a presidential proclamation. So this was actually something that came up because local community members, a lot of them were on the board with Friends of the Desert Mountains, voiced a concern with all the development going on back in the 90s with wanting to preserve some of our open space so people had a great place to recreate, hike, see wildlife, and just enjoy the outdoors to kind of balance some of the big development that was going on out here. And with that designation, the key things for preserving these landscapes that are now the National Monument was to preserve the nationally significant values, which included biological, cultural, recreational, geological, educational, and scientific values. So those are kind of how I'm going to break down, just kind of getting started with some things to kind of share some background on the monument with you, with kind of heading off each one of those values. And then for those of you that are not familiar with the monument, this map up here, it shows kind of what's designated as a national monument. Working up at the Visitor Center off Highway 74, quite often people ask, where's the monument? Thinking it's like an obelisk, some stone, some marker, and we have to tell them, no, you're in it. It's the landscape-based monument. So when you look at this map, think about towards Palm Springs, Snow Creek, that way out west, going all the way past La Quinta. So it's quite a long boundary, and that's, again, skirting along basically kind of like stuff along 111, and it's the whole front side of the mountain, so everything from the base of the mountains that we're seeing here in the valley all the way to the top of the ridge, that's what's being protected, and that's a little over 280,000 acres being protected. And some of those lands are things that Friends of the Desert Mountains purchases for conservation to keep adding to that from private landowners so it doesn't get developed. So really great, a lot of things to see up there, a lot of places to explore, everything from the desert floor up into the mountains where you get the fun snow to play in if you like snow. I found out it's not for me. So one of my first things we'll start with is the biological resources. And for me, my background, I started off as a natural resource specialist for years. I've been a wildlife biologist for the government for a few years. So I know this one has a little bit more slides than others because, again, that's kind of my passion is the wildlife and biological resources. So just something of interest with the monument, we have 5 distinct life zones. So if you've ever ridden the tram, you've probably heard the little video thing talking and saying, traveling like from Mexico to Canada in one day. That's the same thing with the monument, all across, with a lot of our things being at elevation and then going up above 10,000 feet up into an alpine forest. So you do get the diversity of desert floor, and within an hour, if you're driving, you can be up in the forest, or if you take the tram, 10, 15 minutes. Another cool thing is with the biological resources is we've documented that we had at least 19 endemic species, meaning they're found only in the area of the monument and nowhere else in the world. So really cool with having that, and that's with some stuff we'll be talking about some more ways to add to that. We're trying to learn more about our species to see if there's actually some more of interest there. And then we also have 14 federally and state recognized threatened and endangered species. Some we'll see here. But again, it's a good biodiversity hotspot. So for those of us that like being outdoors, looking for birds, reptiles, insects, whatever have you, studying plants, this is a really good place to explore and look for those things, because we have quite an abundance out there as a bio hotspot. So one of our charismatic species, especially here in Rancho Mirage, we see it quite often, is our endangered peninsular bighorn sheep. This is one we just saw this weekend. We shared with that with some visitors, watching them with scopes. This is a nice ram, one of the males. So that's one of the species we have out here. Again, that's one of the 14 listed. It's cute and cuddly. Another cuddly little one is our desert cottontail species. So if you hang around our visitor center, probably see them hopping around under the bushes there quite often. Another charismatic species that we're going to see in the low areas of the monument is the greater roadrunner. So it's really cool when you see the little blue eye patch there behind its eyes. We actually do have a resident that does like to hang around our visitor center and hang out on the fans. So if you ever picnic back there, look for the roadrunner. Sometimes he hangs out on our fans. And then I don't remember what the species is, but I've been seeing right now with a lot of the fall blooms that we're getting with the monsoons that we had this summer, we're seeing a lot of butterflies right now at this time of year. So if you're out, this is a good time, and that's what we'll be doing some bio-blitzing this weekend, trying to learn more about some of our butterfly species out and about pollinating our plants. And this one, because we just celebrated Scary Creatures with Halloween stuff going on. So these are our other local species, ones that you typically see in the evening, but this is our desert hairy scorpion and a sphinx moth. And this was cool. I think Ada was actually with me when I got this photo. We watched this moth, or the scorpion, actually catch the moth in its pinchers there. So again, if you have some patience and some luck, you do get to see some cool Animal Planet type things happening when you're out in the desert. Another fun, creepy creature that people like to see, especially again with this time of year, is desert hairy tarantulas. They're still active right now. They're still kind of in the mating season. So you might see them out on the trail, hanging out on rocks. They're looking for their mates right now. So that's another little local that we may be seeing. And people are always surprised with living in a desert environment. We actually do have amphibians that live out here. This one's a California tree frog, and there's places where we've got natural seeps and springs. We do actually have some other amphibian species that you might come across. This one's for the birders out there. This one's always fun. Here's one of our birds of prey. This is a great horned owl hanging out in a fan palm. And he was kind of giving us judgy eyes with taking a picture of him. But he's up there, and that's a good place with fan palms whenever you're hiking. If you're in a palm oasis or with palm trees, always look around. Those ones actually tend to have a lot of good species hanging out there. And you can tell the great horned owl by the tufts on its with the ears. So this one's a ladder-backed woodpecker. It's another species that we actually do get some woodpeckers that are out here in the desert floor. A lot of other species you'll find up in the forest, but this is one common to the desert. And that's why, again, you see it there on the palm tree, kind of poking around for bugs and whatnot. Again, I'm getting a lot of good species on palm trees. This was all this year. So this one, American kestrel. This is one of our smallest little birds of prey. Very cute little bird of prey there. And it's another one that, again, we've been recently seeing it hanging out at the visitor center, again, on our fans. So it's becoming popular habitat. We've got some other birds. So this one, western bluebird. This one I have seen down here in the valley floor, but this one typically you see more commonly up in the higher elevations. So again, if you like birds, this is again, I think a pretty charismatic, pretty species with coming across and being able to see him. This one, we've got Say's Phoebe. This is one of our migrants coming through, and you can see out, usually with rocks. You look for it kind of leaving some of its droppings behind where it nests and hangs out. But this is one you usually see with hiking out in the canyons, more so than anything. And then we've got this is a male house finch. Very common here, even if you put bird feeders out, this is typically one you'll get to your yards, but very common across the monument landscape seeing them. The males have that nice red color, and the females are actually kind of all of that brownish gray color. So not as good looking as the males there, but still fun to see. And this one always cracks me up. This one is our northern mockingbird. So this is one that actually they call it the mockingbird because it mimics other birds' calls. So sometimes if you're out, you're hearing different things. Might look around, if you have a mockingbird out, it may be just mimicking other bird calls that it's heard that day and trying to throw you off thinking you saw a great bird that really may not be there. Nature has fun with us too. All right, and then getting onto some of our reptiles of the monument. Here is a granite spiny lizard. You can see that nice collar on its neck and the little spines all across its body. This one is a desert iguana. So this is another one we'll typically see, and this is one even in the summertime. Unfortunately, this lizard in particular really likes the extreme heat. And I usually see, even when it's 120 out, I've seen this lizard sunbasking on blacktop, just really absorbing the heat. And unfortunately, it tends up being roadkill a lot with taking that bathing kind of moment there in the sun on the blacktop. But really charismatic, very fun species there. You can see this one actually was shedding when I caught this one. But they like the flats and wash areas, so that's a good place to see them. Here is a banded gecko. This is one that typically, unless you're hiking at night, we usually don't see this one during the day. So if you're ever out doing a night adventure with the friends, this is one you might be able to see. They're very tiny, but very cute with the colors there. And it is a native gecko, not to be confused with the Mediterranean house geckos that some of you guys may see in your homes. Those ones aren't native, but this little cutie here is. And I'm blanking on the name of this snake, but this was one I know we found out in Snow Creek. And you can see with the camera lens, not all snakes are big and scary looking. I think this one's kind of cute, and again, he's got kind of the mask there on its eyes. I think it's like a leer snake, if I remember. And another one hiding, so you never know when you're out and about what's also watching you and keeping an eye on you. So here is an example of a gopher snake kind of keeping a lookout from some cholla barbs hanging out under one of the cholla plants. So they are harmless, non-venomous, and really cool to see when you do get an opportunity. And this one, this is called a blind snake. This is not a worm, and that's actually my hand there, which I do have small hands. So when you see that photo, that little snake there, sometimes they're pink, purple, or black. They're very rare, and I've usually only seen them more so than not out in the Santa Rosa Mountains. But that's one, again, you'd see at night, very rare to find. But they look like worms, very delicate. And then, because biological diversity also includes some plants, so we've got various species of cholla that you can see. This example here is a pencil cholla when it was in bloom. And this one's called a rock hibiscus. So this is one typically in the spring and washes. If you go out looking for wildflowers, you have a good chance of coming across a rock hibiscus. It's related to like the same ones that you'd have like in your yards, the hibiscus plants. Same family. This is just our native one that grows out, just doesn't get as large and bushy. And then this one's our iconic one. Just show of hands, who recognizes that plant? Hopefully if you live here, that should be a good one to know. A few. So if you don't know this plant, this is a good one to get to know. This is our iconic creosote bush. So the creosote is one of the oldest living plants in the world. Clones have been documented to be over 10,000 years old. So we've got some areas with the creosote bush. What happens is when the parent plant dies, it sends out with its roots and it makes a ring where all the clones grow around where the parent plant died. So if you look through aerial photos sometimes or Google Earth and you see rings out in the desert, it's a good chance where this plant grows that you may be seeing a creosote ring, one of the old growth forest out here. Since we don't have redwoods, our creosotes are actually our indicator plants for like kind of our old growth desert forest. And I've seen some places here in the valley that I've actually come across creosote rings. So again, those areas, those plants are thousands of years old, even though they don't get very big. So very interesting to see and very important plant. And then this one's always iconic with the desert. This is our California fan palm. So this is the one that's native. A lot of stuff you see in communities that don't keep the skirts or are very long and or tall and skinny. Those are Mexican fan palms. Those aren't native. So the fan palms here that we're seeing, they actually have very thick trunks and they retain their skirts. So that's how you can tell that's our native one. And it's very good for habitat for a lot of animals. And it's also an indicator with seeps and springs. So if you're ever hiking and come across a palm oasis, there's a good chance there's some water source there, probably underground, but there's something there that keeps the palms growing since they need a lot of water. And then cultural values. We have a lot of cultural history here. Some of it's going to be prehistoric, some of it's going to be historic, and prehistoric items that people may come across out on the trails. Could be stuff like ceramics. It could be bedrock mortars where, people were grinding stones, grinding plants and seeds down. It could be anything from rock walls, overhangs where some of the indigenous Kuya Indians might have used for cover. It could also include some rock cairns. I know a lot of people stack them now with hiking for rock and see different shapes they can do in other things. But there was actually historical rock cairns that still might be littered across the landscape, some of the off-the-beaten-path areas. Even agave roasting pits. If you ever drive up 74 in the Pinyon area, you'll see a lot of agave plants up there. They kind of look like a succulent with tall poles, sticks with the seeds where they grow. And the Kuyas would actually roast those. So sometimes you can find char marks still on the ground where the Kuyas used to roast those plants. It was an important food source for them. And then just with a little note of historic, that's more present. So that can be anything from like cannon bottles that people find out rusted over. Some of that could be like cabins. I know we actually have some historic cabins in the monument that are a few hundred years old. Mines are even historic features. And water improvements, since there was early on grazing, people coming out here, there's still a history with grazing. So there could be water improvements, some fences out like that are hundreds of years old still. So I don't have a whole lot of cultural photos, so that's what I kind of went a little bit further on with that. But sometimes when you're walking out on the trail or out, going cross country, you may come across pot shards. And that's not gonna be like your typical rock. So you look at the colors, if you pick them up, you can feel, like I said, it's very thin. So there's actually still a lot of pot shards that we can find out in certain areas in the landscape. Important we leave them because that tells us the story of how the area was used. Very, very seldom do we ever find the full pots themselves out in areas. Most times it's kind of broken pottery along places. So even finding fragments is pretty exciting. This one's an example of a historic site up in the mountains, somebody building something there to hold some water, a basin, kind of more of the rock structures or barbecue pits. So again, there's some early history there culturally with prehistoric or historic. And some of that even includes some of the trails we're hiking on. So if you guys have ever hiked any of the trails in Indian canyons, you can see with some of the footpaths out there, I didn't have a good photo, but like Palm Canyon's a great example. If you walk that, you can see the tread, how it keeps kind of embedding, getting lower and lower. So it's not at the surface anymore. You're actually created this trail over thousands of years that it's starting to wear around the rock. So it's cool to think about that, walk in the footsteps of ancestors out here. All right, so geological. There actually is some cool geological resources in the monument. And again, just with natural seeps and springs, with when you see that palm oasis out there in the mountains, that does add to the geology with kind of our fault lines. So if you didn't know this, we have the San Jacinto Fault Zone kind of runs through the Santa Rosa, San Jacinto range. And with that, we actually do have numbers of seeps and springs that pop up across the monument with, I would guess, over 30, 40 different unique palm oases easily. So when you see that, that's part of that fault zone, which is part of that geology story out there. So this one, really unique. For those of you that have been out in La Quinta or towards the Lake Cahuilla Park, this is a photo showing the ancient Lake Cahuilla shoreline. So 10+ thousand years ago, we actually did have a natural Lake Cahuilla, ancient Lake Cahuilla, where the water would come in from the Gulf of Mexico. It would flood up to the mountains out here by La Quinta, and over time, it would come and go. So a lot of stories about that, and that's where you kind of see that bathtub ring out there. So when you go over there, it's called Coral Mountain. So again, if you drive towards Lake Cahuilla County Park, look over towards the mountain there. Again, that Coral Mountain next to it, just east of it. And you can actually see that shoreline kind of out there with remnants of when this area used to have water, naturally with that water coming up here. And another remnant of that is when you're walking around, if people haven't picked them all up, you can actually still find relics with some of the sea animals, sea life that used to be out there. So little seashells, crustacean shells, even clam shells you can still find out there. So it's really cool to explore. And again, it's something easily taken for granted that we have this resource out here, this thing to kind of tell us again some of that history, since geology spans quite a length of time. And then this one may be hard to see. So I'm going to see what looking at that. Have you guys ever heard of Martinez landslide? Anybody hear of that one before? Few. So if you haven't heard, this is another interesting geological feature out here. So Martinez landslide, you can still see it also from the La Quinta area. And it's, let me see, right there. So that is the toe of the landslide. So when you look out, it doesn't seem like much, but that mountain above it, there's actually a part that I couldn't get in the photo as much, but there's a flat part of the mountain where at one point during the Pleistocene, when this was a much wetter environment, that whole mountain came down, created the landslide, where we see today the toe of the slope there where it left, where it resided. And that landslide, it's actually the 5th largest landslide in the world and the 2nd largest landslide in the US. And we have that right here in our backyard. Most people don't even realize that that's a remnant of a landslide. So, I believe, well, I know of the first one, that is the backside of the San Bernardino Mountains. I forget what one that one's called, but it's over by like the King Clones. I believe it's on the Lucerne Valley side. I'll have to follow up on that. So if you want me to follow up, I can do that for you. Find me afterwards. Now you have me thinking. I'm wondering what it is. So yeah, Martinez, definitely worth checking out. There's no trail to it, so it's cross-country. Find your path out there, but definitely a unique resource in the backyard here. And then with just fun geology, we have a really interesting batholith, large rock segment with, again, the San Jacinto fault zone, still lifting bedrock up. So you can find some big chunks of rock out there, usually granite, sometimes metamorphic, where it's changed and done stuff over time. And what's cool about this is with the geology out here, is some of these places we actually still do have some natural caves where we don't think we actually have caves. So especially in La Quinta area, if you look out there, you'll see a lot of holes in the rocks, the hills. And again, it's with some of the erosion, ecological processes happening over time. And then this one, really cool with the geology out here, a lot of our, again, base rock is going to be granite, the salt and pepper rock, so it's white and black. And this one shows with some of that typical granite rock with the white and black showing, but you also have growing over this rock, this is called desert varnish. So it's a bacteria that over time grows on the rocks out here. And this would be something, if you ever see a lot of rock outcrops with this patina growing on them, this dark coloration, this would be stuff, like I said, with the looking around, you might actually come across petroglyphs, because that would be, again, something that the Native Americans out here would have etched into that. And when you etch underneath that patina, it exposes that granite rock. So really cool when you see that. That was a good example, so just wanted to point that out for some geology. And then this one, a little bit hard to see, but this one we actually have a good history of mining in the monument. Not very active now. So I found out after I was out at this site that this was actually one of our historic asbestos mines. So that was something we mined out in the monument, was asbestos. There was some silver, some gold, some dolomite, garnets, different metals and precious stones. And this, let's see, oh, wrong one. Oh. Okay. Let me try again. It doesn't want me to show you it. All right, so there is asbestos there. I was going to point out what it kind of looks like. It's kind of that crusty looking part on there. And you can definitely see the little bit of the adit where they were digging in to get that. So there's an area up in the monument off 74 called Asbestos Mountain, and that's a pretty good indicator. That's where they were mining for asbestos. So if you're out there hiking, good to tread lightly for sure. Step lightly because that stuff you don't want to inhale it with kicking stuff up. But that was, again, a mineral that occurred naturally out in this area. And then this one, I love showing this because I am a January baby, and my birthstone is a garnet. So I was so happy when somebody taught me with looking for garnets, how to find them, because it's actually pretty common to find them out here. So you can see embedded on this rock, those dark pieces that you're seeing, those dark colorations, that's actually little chunks of garnet crystals. And when you're out in Palm Springs, sometimes you see an area out by the 10, Garnet Hill. That's another area where people used to mine garnets, but there's places naturally, some mines where people were doing that as well. So again, these are some cool geology things that are easy to mistake or not notice. And then this is another one of my favorites. A lot of people don't know this one. It's best kind of sometimes with driving down Whitewater Road, the connector trail from the 10 to Highway 111. But you can see this definitely off 111. Does anybody see the angel on the mountain there? A few people. I have a feeling this still isn't going to work for me. Oh. Yeah, well, like I said, hopefully you guys see that up top. So it's the light color, probably operator error. But it's up top, you can see the angel wings, you can see the head, and it's kind of just to the right of the center at the top of the peak there. So again, if you're out driving sometime, it's something to look for. It's out between kind of Palm Springs and before you get to Snow Creek Road. So that's kind of the area with looking around what you'd want to see. But there's, again, things that are easy to miss out there. And I know I've heard about that one since I was little, with always look for the angel on the mountain, or sometimes there's another area with a witch on the mountain. I didn't have that photo. But again, a lot of cool things to look for. And then this one's not the greatest photo, but really important to point out, when we actually do get rain, some of the geology out here, we're shaped a lot by water and wind. And so the last time we actually had a good storm out here over the summer, we had right across the highway from the visitor center, we get seasonal waterfalls. So if it starts raining, you want to see a waterfall and see it safely, you go up to the Art Smith Trailhead. That's where this one was located. And within a few minutes of the storm, we saw this waterfall flowing, just cascading down over by the Art Smith Trailhead parking lot there. And I was surprised with how many visitors actually knew to come over and look for that with the rains. So there was actually a group of us out there taking photos and in awe of the waterfall. And then once the rain dissipated, about 30 minutes later or so, the waterfall stopped, and that was the end of the show. But again, really cool with seeing the geology, and that's one I know we always keep our eye on when we work up at the visitor center, the little things that make us excited. All right, and this is just cool with some geology, with showing a good example with some metamorphic rock. So you can see the nice banding there, and you'll probably see that with any place you explore in the monument. You see a lot of cool banding, and that just shows, again, with the heat and pressure, different striations, different things building up over time. even some quartz like this one. So this is a nice big white quartz outcrop that was just hanging in the middle of a drainage that I was hiking in just last week. And you can see just above that to the right, you can see some of that white quartz vein also in the bedrock behind it. So that's another one for indicator with gold miners. They will always look for that white quartz. The rock I can't explain. That's just odd that it's hanging out there with, not in the bedrock, but very cool to come across, very pretty. And like I said, we've got a lot of unique geology out here to explore and just appreciate. And this one, like I said, another one of our values is education. We actually do a lot with that, working with the Friends of the Desert Mountains. And this one actually is with two of Friends, one's the staff, Tammy Martin's their executive director there on the right. And do want to acknowledge that's Buford Kreitz on the left. He was a founding member of the Friends, and he just recently passed this weekend. But he was really instrumental with helping the monument, promoting it, past mayor of Palm Desert. And I know he did a lot with helping the monument to be what it is and promote it and help with relationship building for us early on. So wanted to give a little homage to him in the presentation here. And then a great way for education with getting people started for anything, especially if you guys haven't been to the monument yet or are new to it, stop by our visitor center. This is actually, I kind of cropped out two of my staff. Oops, missing somebody. But for the federal staff, I actually have a group of 4 staff that I manage. So with the 5 of us, it's 5 federal employees, and we manage all the federal lands with the monument, and that's why we depend on like our friends group to help us. Because 5 people for 280,000 plus acres doesn't go too long or too far. So if you ever come up, you have questions, want to know where to hike, you want to show us a picture, what's this animal? We always like that game. Come up and visit us. Right now, our center's open Friday through Sunday. We're just 3 days right now with some staffing delays, but we are open 8:30 to 4 on those days. So again, come visit us. It's a good starting place, especially if you are new to hiking or wanting just recommendations for some easy places to go or some easy places to look for species. And another part of the education programs that we do is leading guided hikes. That may be hikes, across the monument, other side of the valley. Sometimes that's bird walks. We'll do some special guided hikes with some of these value themes that we'll be focusing on. I do plan on leading a hike out to the landslide at some point this year. So again, follow the Friends, but those are great ways. Like I said, we want people to feel comfortable outdoors. And it's always nice going out with a group and people that know things. And if you have questions, again, you get to point things out and test their knowledge, or test my knowledge. I like that. And this is a cool education thing that most people don't know about. This is Black Mountain Fire Lookout. So if you drive up the monument, 243, you can actually hike up to the lookout tower. And those are actually staffed by Forest Service volunteers. And in the summer, it's closed right now because of icy conditions. But you can go up there. If you tell them you want the squirrel card, you get a special card saying that you made it to the fire lookout. They'll sign it off for you saying you were at that lookout. But you get to go up there, you get to see with the tools, just like the old rangers used to do with keeping an eye on fires out there. So it's still kind of an educational, historical value that I don't think a lot of people know about. And a lot of people definitely don't know about that squirrel card. So hoping for some of you guys that are adventurous that are up for the hike, go get your squirrel card up there this summer. And this is the view from Black Mountain Fire Lookout. So this is the back side of the Coachella Valley. So really pretty. I think that's Lake Elsinore. So really cool views. And again, they actually do have volunteers that just hang up there, keeping an eye out for smoke and then alerting if there's a fire event. So there are lookouts spread out across the monument. There's, I think, 2 of them at least. And then another important educational tool that we use is stewardship events. It's always good to get people out on the lands, kind of seeing what's going on. So you get to help out with things like pulling invasive weeds that kind of diminish biodiversity out here. Sometimes it's helping maintain campground sites or trails. We actually have a public lands day event this Saturday that we'll be out doing some cleanup, some rehab. But it's, again, a good way. It's not just about doing work, but it's also kind of sharing some education when we're out doing these things. So again, we look for anything in the monument kind of having an educational tie into that. And I didn't have a photo, but we do also do stuff working with school groups, colleges coming through and stuff like that. So we do keep very busy in the school year. And then again, this is with my background. Scientific stuff was always very important to me. And for the monument, we actually do have a science plan with things we want to study, learn more about. And this was one, like I said, we've got some current programs. It's called community science. So if that's something that maybe you want to be a part of, we actually have a volunteer program where people can actually help us collect science with some professionals, myself included, and help us add some knowledge to some kind of gaps in our knowledge base for the monument. So here's one that started community science, at least for the monument. This is with Ada helping me as a graduate student years ago. And I was studying the western yellow bat that lived in palm trees out here across the Colorado desert. And that was my niece there. She didn't do a good job of spotlighting the bat. She got my dad instead. But he's out there running the detector, looking for the yellow bats, and she's trying to spotlight them as they come out. So we would look for them at palm oases, see them usually within a half hour of sunset. The yellow bat, if they lived inside the palm skirt with the roost, we would actually see them fly out. And this actually was a fun project. We actually did have some youth volunteers involved helping us. Here was 2 of our youth volunteers. We'd go out every palm oasis. We'd look for the bat. We'd count the number of palms. We'd look at stuff with fire history, kind of determine the palm skirt lengths on everything. And we were trying to determine, what parameters kind of made the yellow bat want to stay at that palm oasis. And then here was another site where we were finishing it up with some of the staff there. There's palms on the other side. But it was a great project. Spent a lot of hours, unfortunately, in the summertime, hiking a lot of these trails. I think we hit up 41 or 42 different palm oases. And we found yellow bats almost at every palm oasis that we studied. But not every palm oasis had yellow bat living in them, at least that we can determine. So we did this work in 2012. And just this year, we have San Diego Natural History Museum is actually repeating the surveys. And they're capturing bats at the same palm oases that we originally studied in 2012. So looking forward to hearing that. We'll try to have a lecture with the museum, see if they'll share their findings with what they found. But really fun to see, because that was a species that there was really little written on it. We know very little about the yellow bat. So pulling some information together, we're kind of one of the first published papers. And again, a lot of the friends helped with doing that research, helping out with collecting that. So another cool community science program that we just started last year and we'll do again this year. This one's for the Coachella Valley milk vetch. It's an endangered plant, and we're out here on the sand dunes out by Snow Creek. And those little blue flags that you're seeing out, those are marking individual plants that we're finding of this endangered plant that only lives on the sand dunes here in the valley. So it's found nowhere else. So we definitely had a unique protocol. We worked with UCR botanists to do that. So it was a good partnership program. And we actually found more species than we thought would be out in these areas. And we're looking forward to going back this year. We found a white variant. Typically, this plant is purple flowers. We found a variant, a single plant that had white flowers that's never been documented before. So I know UCR is already asking me when we're going to go back out to look for it. So hope we can find it again and maybe publish something on that with some uniqueness. This is another one. Again, I use my niece a lot. She was my guinea pig for a lot of things. Another popular tool that we use for community science, if you guys use smart devices, tablets or smartphones, you can download what's called the iNaturalist app. And for the monument, we actually have a few projects that we've created where we're just trying to collect information on biodiversity. So if you download that anytime you're out, you snap a photo when you're out on a hike, outdoors somewhere, take a couple of good photos, and it actually helps you ID what you're seeing out there, plant, animal, and then other researchers will see what you've submitted and they'll confirm either you're right, this was that, or no, actually it was this species. So it's a way to learn, and it's a way to help us in the monument to kind of see where we're at for biodiversity. I think we're close to about 2,500 species that have been documented so far, and we're trying to do quarterly special bio-blitzes. People can do this at any time, add to that, just adding the project. But there'll be special times we'll set up with going out to a special site, going out with other researchers So if you have that and want to join and learn about different things out there and help us hopefully increase our numbers, iNaturalist is a good way to get started, and there'll be more stuff on that to come. And one of the projects we're looking at, especially with the monarch butterfly population decreasing, is we've got a project for monarchs and milkweeds. So whenever you're out, if you see milkweed plants, that's more important plants for the monarchs. We want people to take a photo, and with the iNaturalist, it'll geotag that for us so we know where that plant is occurring or what species of plant it is. And hopefully we'll be able to do some stuff for improving habitat for monarchs with their migration here, because this is actually important habitat for their winter migration. And this is another one, again, we just love our sheep, and this was another one from this weekend when we were out. There's another project you can add. I know we partner with the Bighorn Institute, so if you add their project, anytime you're out on the trails, if you're out in the monument and you see sheep, that's our endangered peninsular sheep. You might sometimes see like this sheep here, you can see they were tagged. So he's got the ear tags. This one does have a collar on it. So it is actually being tracked for telemetry with movement patterns. We're trying to understand more about them, where they go, herd dynamics and other things as part of the recovery. And you can see he's got a mouthful, or she has a mouthful there. She was eating some of the new greenage that came out. So I got her mid-bite with eating her salads, her greens. But that's always good, again, for iNaturalist. If you're ever out with the bighorn, you see ones with tags or collars, always good to kind of snap that, just for helping us with research to kind of understand with movement patterns. And then for recreation, there's a lot to do with recreation. There's over 280 miles of designated hiking trail all across the boundary, so a lot to explore. Another way that people can enjoy with recreating in the monument is sometimes taking a drive. So for those of you that maybe don't want to go out hiking and do stuff like that, there is a section of Highway 74 right by the Visitor Center going up just beyond the Palm Canyon trailhead where you can drive it. And that's a nice scenic byway. So that's the only paved road in the monument that you'd be able to drive a portion of it and then drive around. So definitely recommend the drive. But do note that beginning part with the switchbacks, the windiness, you do want to be careful with driving. And then there is hiking in the monument, so that's always another way to enjoy things is camping. So Pinion Campground here, it's just above Palm Desert. It's first come, first serve. And then there's other campground sites, there's like yellow post sites on Forest Service lands up the mountain. For BLM lands, you can camp anywhere, but you have to be like 200 feet off the roads or trails. But this one's a nice designated campground if you're looking for that, where it's not restrictions, you can actually have a fire up there, and we'll try to do some campfire programs this spring. So really nice, and again, it's not too far with just heading up the mountains, a little bit cooler. And then we've got various trails. So here's one out in Palm Springs. This is part of the Lickin Trail, kind of before you head into the Indian Canyons. You can see the trail, and that was right after all the brittle bush out there bloomed. So that's a pretty area. Another one, you'd look for sheep out there. This one's really popular with the visitor center. A lot of people, this is an easy hike to do, about 2.5 miles. This is the Randall Henderson Trail. And this one, when people come to the visitor center, this is one we usually recommend people start on. Because again, there's smaller loops, so you can do less than 2.5 miles, but it is easy. Most of our trails in the monument are going to be moderate to strenuous because, again, we're up against the mountain and just only one way to go. But this one's really nice over here to hike. You have a chance to see 2 endangered species. The peninsula bighorn sheep we see sometimes out there, as well as this is where we started documenting a new population of desert tortoises. So in the springtime, we'll be back onto tortoise community science stuff, looking for our tortoises out there, which a lot of hikers are sharing information, and we're learning we actually have a tortoise population in the Santa Rosas now, thanks to a lot of visitors coming in and sharing sightings with us. And this one, if you're up for a backcountry experience, I did this one early on in my career. This was starting up at the Palm Springs tram, and I hiked down to Idlewild from the tram station, and this is part of the Devil's Slide Trail. So if you're in for an overnight camp out up there and want to hike down like that and have arrangements made, that was a really cool hike being up in the upper country there. It was a great summertime hike because it's easily 30 degrees cooler. And again, that was nice because we planned it for most of that being downhill. I prefer the downhill. And then another cool thing with our trails, if you, like I said, maybe not into hiking as much, maybe you do like horseback riding. There are some of our trails are open up to horseback riding, equestrian. So if you want to get out, that's another good way to explore the trails horseback. There's some local stables where you can go out with a guide or rent to do that. And some of the trails are also open to mountain bikes, not e-bikes, but mountain bikes, so the non-motorized ones. And then again, this one's just another cool hike out in Palm Springs. This is the Earl Henderson Trail. Can't quite see the Indian Canyons Park from there. Here's the Bogart Trail. It's another one, Palm Springs. We're working on potentially building a new trail over there at some point, but that's a popular place for a lot of the residents over there. Great views, another place again. People have seen bighorn sheep and tortoises over that way. And then, again, the big takeaway from this was, we want people to go out and explore the monument. So there's great ways to explore that on designated trails. And then kind of once you start getting your comfort, there's also great chances to explore some of the backcountry areas. So some of this will be a mix of that, encouraging, some unique trails as well as some off-the-cuff kind of exploring cross-country with making your own adventures and seeing unique things. So this is a pretty popular trail, or at least with some people it's pretty popular. Have you guys ever heard of the Pacific Crest Scenic Trail? So that's like the Appalachian Trail of the West. If you haven't heard of it, so this trail actually runs from Mexico to Canada, and I think it's like 26, I forget and change, the mileage. So over 2,600 miles long. So we have a section that cuts through the monument, and then it kind of follows the ridge. So it kind of starts on the southern terminus, because most people tend to start this trail from Mexico, and then make their way up north. So it's all about timing. About 100 people a year on average actually hike the full trail. And I know for the monument's anniversary earlier this year, October 24th, I led a hike out on this section of the Pacific Crest Trail, and we actually saw a hiker that was just on her final leg finishing her last 50 miles. So really cool if you're ever out. I always recommend people, if you can't do the full trail, go out, do little snippets of it. You can just start at some of the little trailheads, do a little bit, and you can still say you hiked some of the PCT. They don't have to know you weren't a thru hiker doing the whole shebang, but you can at least go out and see that. So this view here is from Snow Creek. It's a paved road, so I know that's where I started the hike when I led that. And we hiked towards the 10 freeway. So there's a portion that we start in Snow Creek. You go through this big wash area, some cool plants out there, some cool things to see, and then you go actually under the 10. And it was cool. It was my first time doing that, but we saw actually people leaving encouraging notes for other PCT hikers. You're almost there. People leaving names. So-and-so was here, and everybody kind of has like a trail name. So if you go onto the Pacific Crest Trail website, you can see with what thru hikers made it and what their trail name was and when they accomplished. So again, it's a cool part of the recreational history of the monument, people doing that and planning. So that's more of the desert side, and that goes to the mountains kind of there in the background. That heads up to our sister monument, Sand to Snow National Monument. So if you hiked from Snow Creek, you could actually go over to Sand to Snow National Monument there and continue up and go through up till Big Bear. So cool hiking, very nice. That one was pretty level, so that's what I chose, that it was a nice easy one, as opposed to going the other direction there up the mountain. So again, keeping it simple, just wanting people to have the experience being on that, hearing about that, learning a little bit about that unique history. And I know for me as a land manager, just learning that we've got some special inventories that we're going to be doing looking at that trail, because this portion out here in particular, it's been washed out a lot by rains. So we notice there's a lot of flood damage going on out there. It's a big floodplain with where that trail's going. So we'll do some stuff with kind of looking at that, some assessments for potential reroute in the future, just because it keeps washing every rain, that section out there. But it's a really spectacular trail to do. And this would be an area actually with that Snow Creek portion in the spring. I think they have some really unique wildflowers out. So if you guys are anybody that likes to go out, look for wildflowers with some good blooms. I think this is actually a good little treasure location that a lot of people don't know about, because with the western end, you get a little bit cooler, wetter temperatures out there. And they actually were on the kind of the ecotone, so there's some other species that we don't typically have of deserts. So you can see some other unique stuff that we're typically not going to see anywhere else in the monument except for that area. So worth checking out. Again, spring. I'm sure friends will keep up with where the best places are to see flowers, but I know that's on my list that I'll be looking at when season comes up. And then this one's always popular. This is again across the highway. Those switchbacks may look familiar to you. That's the Art Smith Trail. This is a strenuous hike, but it's very popular. A lot of people like doing that, and that's, again, open to hikers, equestrian, and mountain bikers. And what's great about it is actually this is a good connected trail. So if you start up the switchbacks, you go up for about 1.5 miles, you can actually either keep going down the Art Smith, and you'll cross a couple different natural palm oases along your way out. It dead ends, so you have to come back whatever you do it coming in. Or at the split, you can take the Hop Along Cassidy Trail, which skirts along Bighorn, takes you down to the Target Shopping Center. So I always used that in the past as my turkey trot the day after Thanksgiving. Got some volunteers with me in the past. I think I need to revive that tradition. But yeah, always look for a fun hike, kind of getting out and exploring. But that was really nice with actually seeing that. And again, there's some unique stuff along the way there. Even if you like just seeing views of the valley, having that comfort, like not being too far. So you have that option from that split. And that's a lot of stuff, some great bighorn sheep habitat up there. There's also for mountain bikers that take the Art Smith. There's ways you can get out all the way out towards Palm Springs, some other connector trails. So I know, again, that's popular, different user groups like with different things out there. So some good options. But again, very popular. Just this one is for people that are up for a strenuous challenge. And this is another popular one. I know we did recently for Bat Week. We did out in the La Quinta Cove a little bat walk out there. But La Quinta Cove is a great area to go hiking. The beginning part of the cove is open to dogs. Most trails in the monument are not open to take your dogs with you to protect the peninsular bighorn sheep at this time. But the beginning part of the cove, you can go out there with your dog, hike around. We do have a staff that actually leads guided dog walks out there and talks about that. So some good opportunities. And then if you keep going on some of the trails, there's some unique areas with hiking out there even further. So again, it's kind of making it what you want. There's a lot of wash out there in the cove. So again, washes are usually good places for looking for flowers. And then we have some stuff going up to like some palm oases up there that you wouldn't imagine if you hike up into those mountains. You can actually come up to a pretty unique palm oasis out in Bear Creek. So great opportunities out there. That's another area I think that was 3 years ago, we found out we also have tortoises out in La Quinta Cove now. So again, hikers shared that with us. Actually, no, that one was visitors. We actually had some visitors go out La Quinta Cove. They were hiking. A woman was out with her granddaughter, and they came across a tortoise and a little baby, a hatchling. So it looked like a mom and the baby. And what most people think is that our tortoises aren't native. So what they did is they took the adult, the one that they could get, tried to take it to the zoo to return it and turn it in. And working through the zoo, that was just something recently we've been able to do, is work with the zoo, and now they know that we are studying what seems to be a native population of desert tortoises out here in this area. So the zoo has been really good with no longer accepting the tortoises, because once they accept it, they can't be released. So really good if you're out on the trails, if you do see a tortoise, leave it be. Again, you can always share that information with our visitor center, because that's how we're getting a lot of our data right now, is the public sharing some new information with us where we can follow up and look for burrows and do some studies and do some more research on them. But again, that's one we'll be looking at more so later this year for tortoise and some other cool things. And this is also another area, sadly, we're seeing a lot of stuff with climate change. We're losing some of our natives out there. So keep an eye with some changes, probably getting close on time. This one, really fun to share, though. This is one we'll be up this weekend for our Public Lands Day. This is Dunn Road. And Mike Dunn was actually a former Forest Service employee who was a backcountry ranger, and he'd explore this area out in Pinyon all the time. So what's unique about this road is that even though he's a federal employee, knew kind of processes with things, permits, he kind of took it upon himself to start building a road out there. Got a buddy with him. They started dropping bags of flour from an airplane of where he wanted to create this road, because he was going to build it between kind of Pinyon up Highway 74 and Palm Springs. He was going to build a city called Atejo up there. So Atejo was never built, got hit up with a lot of lawsuits and legal challenges since he never owned the land, never had the permits, but he was selling the property and selling parcels to people with buying the stuff. So we'll learn more about that on Public Lands Day, but that road still exists. It's no longer open for vehicles, so traffic's not allowed to drive on it except for like admin for our staff. But it is a great place if you want to see that with hiking. So if you do hike up there, again, I know Public Lands Day this Saturday, we'll talk about it, but there's a portion of that you can still see. They put a plaque on one of his bulldozers out there in the middle of the trail, in the middle of the road now. So you can see the ode to Mike Dunn, his infamous tractor, with his infamous plan to build this city out there that never happened. So a lot of history in that one. If you know the goat trails, some of that was the goat trails. He built down here closer to the valley in Cathedral Canyon, because once he got sued, he just figured he'd build another road and try to keep connecting and get around the government or the cities, but nothing ever happened. So again, that's just a fun parcel history with the monument, fun run to see. And then just good views, some backcountry areas. There's some really pretty areas with just getting out there, exploring, kind of getting off the trail with your comforts and just kind of having some good information about that. Some really pretty sights, good sunset watching. That one's, again, another more urban one that may look familiar with people. That's behind the Target Shopping Center. So again, if you're not comfortable with doing some of those backcountry ones or wilderness yet, this is a good one getting started. That's some of the Hopalong Cassidy there, Mike Schuler Trail behind the Target Shopping Center, so that's very popular. I hadn't seen that until recently, but there's always tons of cars over there, and it's now part of that CV link. So that kind of sections out there as well. And then again, just another cool backcountry area. This was an offshoot between Dunn Road and now the Palm Canyon Wild and Scenic River. And that was actually just last week, so you can see some of the snow there on Mount San Jacinto from the Santa Rosas. So a couple of cool things to kind of put on your radar to get out. Again, I just really like that one, so I used it again. So I'm hoping with the presentation today, just kind of giving you guys some ideas with things in the monument, why it's protected, showing you some slides there, some pretty places to potentially go see. I'm hoping you guys be encouraged to go out, go explore this monument, because that's why it's protected. We want people out there. We want you guys to make your own adventures, have your own moments with your kind of unique ways that you bond with the monument and the memories that you make out there, taking family or having an aha moment, seeing a bighorn sheep herd, maybe seeing a rare plant or learning something new. But there's a lot of great stuff to do there. And again, I'm so happy to be able to manage this wonderful monument because there's so much there that I'm still learning, as I've had 10 years so far with exploring, and I still find new stuff all the time. So hopefully in the future, we'll either see you come by the visitor center, we'll see you on the trail, or maybe even see you as a volunteer and get to do some fun stuff with us helping to protect this wonderful resource. Thank you.